Foreshadowing is when a story hints or teases plot points or major reveals throughout, usually in such a subtle way that they aren't picked up at the time but can't be missed on subsequent rewatches. This is something that the Star Wars franchise has utilised a lot over the years, and so today we're going to be looking at some of the greatest examples. I'm Si for WhatCulture.com, and these are the 10 best moments of foreshadowing in Star Wars history. Number 10. Rey's vision, The Force Awakens. Though the Star Wars prequels introduced a multitude of brand new characters to the franchise, these were joined by familiar names telling a story that audiences ultimately already knew the ending of. However, the sequels had few apparent ties to the original trilogy to begin with, aside from the obvious. It was the job of J.J. Abrams to make those connections, one of which came when Rey found Luke Skywalker's lightsaber. The weapon was in the possession of Maz Kanata, something that has yet to actually be explained, and it called out to the new hero of the galaxy. When Rey touched the lightsaber, she was launched into a vision. This showed the setting of Rey's battle with Kylo Ren among the trees at the end of the movie, but it also foreshadowed a part of Luke's history. She saw the hooded Jedi reach out and touch R2-D2 with his metal hand, a scene that would ultimately be shown in The Last Jedi. This was one of the few threads brought to the table by J.J. Abrams that was paid off properly by Rian Johnson, as the sequel confirmed that what Rey saw was the fallout of Kylo Ren's attack on his uncle's Jedi Academy. Number 9. Obi-Wan's fate, Revenge of the Sith. Ever since 1977, the majority of on-screen Star Wars content has acted as a prequel to A New Hope. Only episodes 5 through 9, The Mandalorian, The Book of Boba Fett and Star Wars Resistance are set after episode 4, whereas everything else comes before it on the timeline, giving Star Wars a unique opportunity. In this way, the franchise is able to foreshadow and hint at things yet to happen in the timeline, but the fans have already seen. They might know what's coming, allowing the foreshadowing to be slightly less subtle, but that doesn't mean that it isn't any less effective. During Anakin and Obi-Wan's rescue of Palpatine towards the beginning of Revenge of the Sith, Kenobi was knocked out and essentially had to be carried to safety. Palpatine implored Skywalker to leave his master behind to avoid being slowed down, but Anakin refused. He told his future master that Obi-Wan's fate would be the same as their own. In the immediacy, the young Jedi means either they all escape or none of them do. However, if you expand on that to include their ultimate fate, then Anakin's words were correct. Obi-Wan Kenobi died on the Death Star in A New Hope before both Darth Vader and the Emperor met their demise, though in the case of the latter only temporarily, upon the new Death Star in Return of the Jedi. Number 8. The Dark and the Light, Revenge of the Sith. From the moment of Qui-Gon Jinn's death, it became the responsibility of Obi-Wan Kenobi to train Anakin Skywalker in the ways of the Jedi. Though in this, their relationship was that of Master and Padawan, in reality they grew to be more like brothers. There was always going to be a point in the prequel trilogy where the two went their separate ways. The brothers would have to become brothers no more in the build-up to Anakin's transition to Darth Vader, and you can almost pinpoint the exact moment this happens in Revenge of the Sith. Anakin had been disillusioned with the Jedi Council for some time at the point of Obi-Wan's Kenobi to capture General Grievous on Utapau, and though in their final conversation before meeting again on Mustafar, Anakin apologised to his master, this was the beginning of the end. There is a very simple yet very effective foreshadowing of Anakin's turning to the dark side, no more complex than merely standing in the dark. As the two bid farewell to each other, Obi-Wan stands in the light of the sun while Anakin stands underneath shadow. Number 7. Tobias Beckett's warning to Han Solo, Solo a Star Wars Story. With the fleshing out of Han Solo's character in Solo a Star Wars Story came the introduction of several characters from his past. Arguably, the most important was Tobias Beckett, who essentially took him under his wing and acted as a mentor to him. One of the most important conversations the two had was when Tobias gave some advice on how he had survived for so long. He assumed that everyone would betray him and trusted no one. This way he was never disappointed or surprised. There was always a risk of Tobias doing whatever was necessary to protect himself rather than thinking of Han or Chewie. This ultimately happened when Tobias found a way to get back into the good books of Dryden Voss. Beckett portrayed Han by sending him out to Voss, telling him of the plan to give him fake coaxium. Taking into account the previous conversation though, Han assumed that Beckett would betray him just as he had been instructed, and so double bluffed and fooled both he and Voss. Yes, Beckett did betray Han Solo, but in a way at least he gave him fair warning. Number 6. Face down the entire First Order, The Last Jedi. Everyone knows how it went for the Resistance when they tracked down Luke Skywalker, pinning just about all of their hopes of victory on his return. When the Jedi Master threw his lightsaber over his shoulder, it angered Star Wars fans like nothing else before. In spite of this, Rey was undeterred and continued to lobby for Luke's support in the fight against the First Order. Seemingly mocking Rey's belief that one Jedi could come and save the galaxy, he told her that she was wasting her time. Or did he? In telling Rey that she was being ridiculous, Luke actually told her exactly what he was going to do. He derivatively asked if she thought he was going to walk out with a laser sword and face down the whole First Order as though it was a ludicrous idea, but guess what he did? Gold star for anyone who said walk out with a laser sword and face down the whole First Order. It may have been a projection of the Jedi Master rather than him being there himself, but long before the Resistance ever made it to CRAIT, Luke had told everyone exactly what his plans were. Number 5. Luke's projection on CRAIT, The Last Jedi. Say what you like about the sequel trilogy on the whole, The Last Jedi in particular and its treatment of Luke Skywalker seeing the iconic Jedi face down the First Order was awesome. Luke himself told audiences what he was going to do, but he kept it to himself that he would be projecting himself across the galaxy. There was still enough teasing that could have given this reveal away early, but fans would have to look much harder for it. Starting with the almost impossible to notice, Luke's footprints on the surface of CRAIT had no effect on the sand, indicating that there was no one actually there. More than that, it was matter-of-factly established that there was just one way in or out of the stronghold on CRAIT. With the Resistance already inside, and with the First Order trying to batter down the door, it should have been obvious that when Luke showed his face, he wasn't really there. Finally, there is the question of his choice of lightsaber. Ever since losing his blue saber in Empire Strikes Back, Luke sported his green sword even throughout The Mandalorian, and flashbacks to nearly murdering his own nephew. Why then did he choose the blue lightsaber given back to him by Rey? Could this have been a hint that it wasn't the real Luke since he wasn't sporting the usual green? Number 4. Kanan didn't prepare Ezra. Rebels. The overarching story of Star Wars Rebels surrounded the people of the galaxy rising up and coming together to fight the Empire. At the heart of the narrative was the Master and Padawan relationship between Kanan Jarrus and Ezra Bridger. The two shared a deep connection, and by the back end of the series both had arguably equally as strong connections with the Force as each other. Right at the beginning of Jedi Knights, the painful episode in Season 4 in which Kanan ultimately gave his life, the Jedi Master meditated and heard voices of his past. One of these was Ezra's, claiming that Kanan didn't prepare him for this. However, this was something that hadn't yet been spoken and was in fact something from the future rather than the past that Kanan wouldn't be there for. This was kind of the whole point. In the very next episode, Doom, it was Ezra who reflected in search of answers in the fallout of his master's death. It was only then that the Padawan spoke to the exact phrase heard by Kanan in the previous episode. The Force doesn't just connect to the past, but also to the future, and this was a fantastic showing of that, and arguably one of Star Wars' best series so far. Number 3. Jedi Knights can be killed. The Phantom Menace. When Anakin Skywalker was a child, the Jedi Order was strong. In the past, there had been 10,000 Jedi Knights guarding the galaxy, the Council had a prominent place on Coruscant alongside the Senate, and their powers were the stuff of legends. They were basically superheroes. Living on Tatooine as a slave of Watto's, Anakin likely dreamed of being rescued by a Jedi Knight. And when Qui-Gon and company arrived in Watto's shop, it didn't take him long to realise exactly what the mysterious man was. In a conversation over dinner, Anakin gushed somewhat over the skill and prowess of the Jedi Knights. Proudly, the future council member explained that no one could ever kill a Jedi, though Qui-Gon was forced to disagree with him. He wished it were true, certainly, but the Jedi were not invincible, something that he himself proved before the movie was over. Anakin himself would then grow up to kill his fair share of Jedi as part of Order 66, many of them younglings no older than he was when he first learned this valuable lesson. Number 2. Luke saw himself in Darth Vader, The Empire Strikes Back. It may be coming up to half a century ago, but there was a time when no one knew that Darth Vader was Luke Skywalker's father. Now it's arguably the most famous plot twist in cinematic history, and part of what made it so great was that nobody saw it coming. There were several hints throughout both A New Hope and The Empire Strikes Back that perfectly foreshadowed the true identity of Luke's father, and looking back now, it's almost strange to think that fans didn't put it together sooner. The main part of this came during Luke's Jedi training with Yoda on Dagobah. When Luke decapitated the image of Vader and saw himself underneath the facade, there was a lot to say about his fear of turning to the dark side. But this also showed that he could have turned into Vader in a much more literal way. Add this to Uncle Owen's fear that Luke has too much of his father in him, and there is too much imagery of Luke literally becoming Anakin to ignore. The twist was foreshadowed perfectly in that it doesn't ruin the reveal, but it seems so obvious looking back. And number 1, flying through the Dreadnought, The Last Jedi. No one could have predicted just how divisive Star Wars The Last Jedi would have been. The Force Awakens, though essentially a rehashing of A New Hope, was a license to print money for Disney, and released to generally favourable reviews, but the follow-up split fans firmly down the middle. There were a lot of things fans hated about Rian Johnson's Star Wars movie, one scene in particular being Leia floating through space to get back on board the ship. This was supposed to be a huge moment as Leia used the Force to save herself, but for many it just didn't land as it was meant to. There was an even more subtle still further layer to the scene, as it foreshadowed exactly how the rebels were going to escape to CRAIT. This cleverly foretold another aspect of the movie that wasn't particularly well received, namely Holdo's plan to essentially skewer the Star Dreadnought supremacy with the abandoned Resistance cruiser. Earlier in the movie, as General Organa used the Force to re-enter the ship, she flew straight through a hologram of the Dreadnought in exactly the same way as Holdo would pilot their ship through the real one. This is a great piece of foreshadowing that doesn't get the appreciation it deserves, partly because 50% of the audience would rather these scenes didn't exist at all. And that's the list. Let us know what you thought about this video down in the comments below. Which is your favourite moment of foreshadowing in Star Wars? And of course, let us know of any others that we didn't include. Make sure you like this video, share it with your friends, subscribe and hit that notification bell. Head over to whatculture.com for more content every day. I've been Cy for What Culture, and have a good week.